In the orbit of -4, there was an aging communication station known for its sensational headlines and questionable sources. This station, Tattered Beta Stream, specialized in broadcasting the strangest, most unverified stories in the galaxy. Anomalies, conspiracies, rumored sightings of ghosts in nebulae, or dancing star whales near the fringes of black holes. People tuned in mostly for entertainment, laughing at the outlandish claims. But one day, a broadcast interrupted the usual comedic banter with something so attention-grabbing that even the station's most devoted skeptics paused. A short clip featuring a small human girl in a wheelchair, apparently paralyzed from the waist down, found on a remote mining planet next to a chained dragon screaming in agony. The camera was shaky, the quality terrible, but the image was unmistakable, the girl's face pale and determined. The dragon's form, monstrous yet undeniably real, thrashing against thick metal chains. The title flashed in bright neon letters. Paralyzed human girl found chained dragon screaming for help. What happened next shocked everyone. Across the interplanetary networks, the story spread like a cosmic wildfire. Cryptic rumors abounded. Some believed it was a hoax performed by skilled animatronics. Others speculated that a hidden war beast had been unearthed from ancient times. Still others insisted it was a bizarre performance art piece orchestrated by a bored trillionaire. The Tattered Beta Stream insisted they had exclusive footage, but they had no other details. The host teased that an expedition team had been dispatched to uncover the truth, implying that all would be revealed in their next broadcast. Several governments and private organizations perked up in response to the sudden hype. It was rumored that the Interplanetary Governance Council, IGC, the overarching authority that set trade taxes and tried, with limited success, to maintain peace among star systems, took particular interest in the possibility of a dragon. Any sign of large, potentially bioengineered creatures fell under various treaties that labeled them as Class X or higher anomalies, capable of either catastrophic destruction or immeasurable profit. Then there were the treasure hunters, mercenaries, and self-proclaimed myth chasers, all drawn to the promise of fame or fortune. Meanwhile, the shaky video clip continued to loop on 1,000 screens, showing a pale, dark-haired girl named Alara. She wore a slightly tattered jumpsuit, and her wheelchair had a glint of advanced design. Reinforced wheels, a tinted control panel, flickers of scanning lights. In the background, the dragon, mottled metallic scales, eyes glowing like molten cores, pulled against its restraints, unleashing an echoing screech that rattled the camera's audio feed. The final few frames captured Alara staring directly into the lens, her gaze somehow calm, fearless, though the ground beneath her was covered in cracks, scorched edges, and the constant trembling of that monstrous creature in the background. By the time Tattered Beta Stream's broadcast ended, a swarm of speculation had begun. 3 days later, the coordinates leaked. The planet's name was Muoi Lo Ro, an old mining world once known for extracting energy salt, a crystalline mineral used in mid-grade reactor systems. The place had been mostly abandoned when cheaper resources were found elsewhere. On no official registry did it mention any large fauna, let alone a dragon. But data about Muoi Lo Ro was scarce, so the rumor lived on, fueled by the mesmerizing possibility of discovering a war beast from a bygone era. Unsurprisingly, the first to arrive at Muoi Lo Ro were not the IGC, or any high-level scientific expedition. Instead, Tattered Beta Stream sent a ragtag crew of private contractors, half mercenaries and half cameramen, to capture the story. Their ship, the Nostrum Gaze, was an old freighter with more duct tape than actual plating. 3 individuals led the charge. First was Dina, the so-called field reporter, who introduced herself as a fearless journalist but carried no microphone, only a battered stun rifle she barely knew how to use. Next was Hank, an ex-security officer who'd lost his job after an unfortunate incident involving mislabeled crates of exotic birds. Finally, Kenzo, the pilot cameraman who prided himself on getting the shot at any cost. They were motivated by modest pay and the potential for a massive viral scoop. When they landed on Muoy low Roas surface, they found a desolate land of chalky plains and enormous crystalline pillars that shimmered with a milky residue. A faint wind carried flecks of salt crystals through the air, stinging skin and corroding exposed metallic parts. The mission was straightforward. Find the rumored location of the chained dragon, film it, perhaps interview the girl if she was still alive, and return in triumph with undisputed proof. After hours of scanning, they located an ancient mining shaft partially collapsed by rock slides. From within it came the distant echo of something that roared every few minutes, low, guttural, raw. Dina's hands trembled as they passed beneath a bent sign that read Sector 7, once a bustling hub for extracting the planet's resources. The ground was littered with old tool casings, rusted or carts, and collapsed scaffolding. Their nerves were on high alert. Hank's tension grew as he caught glimpses of enormous claw marks scored into the rocky walls. Then they found her, Alara. She was sitting calmly against a ridge of stacked crates near the entrance. Her wheelchair's wheels were partly stuck in a shallow groove of dried salt. Her black hair was braided simply, and her eyes glinted with an odd mixture of relief and exasperation when she saw them. She said nothing at first, letting them approach. Kenzo lifted his camera, capturing the moment in shaky detail. Alara nodded politely, as if used to being filmed. Dina crouched, voice trembling. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, noticing Alara's wheelchair jammed in place. "I'm fine," Alara said softly. Then her gaze flicked behind them, scanning the environment. "You should not be here. It's not safe." Hank cleared his throat. "We're here to help. That thing that's roaring, is there really a dragon in there?" He gestured toward the deeper tunnels, from which a faint scraping and moaning sound echoed. Alara looked tired. "Yes, there is. But it's not just a dragon. He was once more than that." She glanced down, brushing salt crystals from her lap. "But first, can you help me move my chair? The wheels keep sinking." They hurried forward to yank the wheelchair free from the powdery salt layer. As soon as they did, the ground trembled with a low rumble, followed by a thunderous roar from deeper inside. Hank jumped back, gun raised, while Dina staggered, nearly dropping her stun rifle. A gush of warm air rushed from the shaft, accompanied by the pungent odor of scorched metal. Kenzo captured it all on camera, heart pounding. Alara sighed. "He's in pain," she murmured, adjusting the controls on her wheelchair. Then she turned to them, speaking more firmly. "Did you bring any sedation gear? Or maybe specialized chains? He's locked with something old, something that's hurting him whenever he moves." Dina shook her head. "We came with cameras and a few basic weapons. That's it. We're a news team, not a rescue squad." Alara's eyes flickered with disappointment. "Then you'll need to stay out of the way," she said, turning her chair toward the tunnel. "Because if the chains break wrong, it could trigger a meltdown sequence in his implants. It'll get messy." Kenzo, filming with an almost manic obsession, followed closely, ignoring Hank's protest that they regroup. The deeper they went, the more they realized the scale of the environment. Giant pillars reinforced by the old mining corporations, overhead lights that flickered faintly with leftover power, corridors that branched off into smaller tunnels. Strange scratches marked the walls, some shaped like half circles, as though enormous claws had swiped across stone. The air thickened with tension. At last, they reached a massive open chamber. In the center was a sight that froze them. A dragon, nearly 30 feet tall at the shoulder, chained to reinforced columns. Its scales were dark silver with faint lines of circuitry near the edges, suggesting some kind of mechanical integration. The creature's tail lay coiled around pillars, each chain link as thick as a man's torso, anchored by ancient, humming devices. Its wings were pinned with clamps attached to overhead cables that led into the rock. And the roar, raw, pained, reverberating, came from deep within its chest. Fire flickered at the edges of its mouth, a sign of the creature's fury or agony. Alara approached, ignoring the alarmed shouts from the camera crew. She lifted one hand, palm outward, voice trembling. "ARX," she called, as if speaking to a companion. "I'm here." The dragon blinked once, powerful eyes swirling with confusion. Then it roared again, straining against the chains. The walls shook, dust rained from the ceiling. Kinzo cursed under his breath, filming everything, certain that if they survived, this footage would blow the galaxy's mind. Hank fiddled with his weapon, fighting the urge to run. Alara moved closer until she was almost within reach of the dragon's snapping jaws. Yet, somehow, the dragon stopped thrashing. Its enormous head pivoted, nostrils flaring, as if it recognized her scent. She leaned forward in her wheelchair, gently pressing the tip of her fingers against the nearest metal coil that pinned its foreleg. Strange sparks leapt from the chain to her fingertips. She shuddered, letting out a small gasp. No, 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 she murmured. They set the failsafe. They're using old vulture tech. If we pull the chain incorrectly, we'll fry him. Dina swallowed, unable to tear. Her gaze away. Vulture tech? Isn't that the rumored bioweapon program from decades ago? The one that supposedly created living starships with organic intelligence. Alara nodded, eyes still on the chain. Yes, ARX was one of them. But they tried to bury him here, forget him. Now he's stuck half asleep, half awake, screaming with old memories. She twisted the small dial on her wheelchair's armrest, prompting a faint humming sound. Then the dial glowed with a strange red symbol, V9, flickering like a specter. Alara closed her eyes, exhaling as if focusing on an internal signal. The chain on the dragon's foreleg began to vibrate. ARX gave a muffled roar, as though confused, stepping back and clanking against the other chains. Salt dust spiraled up in a small whirlwind around them. The camera crew cowered behind a collapsed cart, uncertain whether to intervene or watch. Suddenly, a new voice crackled through the chamber's upper loudspeakers, an authority-laden bark that echoed. This is the Interplanetary Governance Council Enforcement Unit. By decree of Treaty 12X, you are ordered to cease all interaction with any potential Class X anomaly. Step away from the creature. A swarm of lights beamed in from above, revealing a cluster of figures on a rocky ledge, IGC. Soldiers clad in dark uniforms, brandishing rifles that glowed with suppression rounds. Leading them was a stern-faced official wearing colonel stripes, flanked by a subordinate carrying a large device that beeped ominously. The reflection of a dragon's glow danced across their visors. "This is your final warning," the colonel shouted. "Move away from the beast, or we will open fire." Hank and Dina exchanged panicked looks. Kinzo kept filming, breath shaky. Alara's expression hardened. She spun her wheelchair around, looking up at the soldiers. "If you shoot at him, you'll set off a meltdown in the chain's failsafe. That will vaporize half this chamber, and likely everyone inside." She shouted the words with a grim urgency, hoping to dissuade them. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have orders. That creature is considered a threat to the stability of multiple star systems. There's a reason the program Vulture was canceled." Alara's lips tightened. She called back, "He's not a threat. Not if you let me help him." Then she muttered to the camera crew, half to herself, "We have to break the chain correctly, or it'll trigger the meltdown." The colonel's voice boomed, "We will handle this. Stand down, or be arrested for interfering with a classified matter." Almost on cue, the ground shook violently. ARX roared once more, hurling himself sideways, snapping cables in a fountain of sparks. The temperature spiked, and the soldier with the beep device cursed as it began flashing rapidly. The colonel barked an order, and the IGC squad opened fire, bright streaks of energy that pelted the dragon's side. ARX howled in pain, his tail slamming the floor. Alara screamed for them to stop, but the chamber erupted in chaos. The creature's bound wing tore free of a clamp, raking a twisted arc through the air. The shockwave knocked Dina and Hank over, and Kinzo nearly lost his camera. Shrapnel flew across the space, biting into rock and steel. The colonel's face darkened as alarms on his device blared. In the midst of it, Alara reached out with trembling hands and touched the chain's primary lock. She whispered words that made no sense to the others, but were part of a code deep in her mind. The lock spark clicked. She winced as if receiving a jolt of electricity through her body. ARX froze, eyes flaring. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then Alara cried out, "ARX, calm. I'm with you." The dragon's chest heaved in ragged breaths, but the mania in his eyes dampened slightly, replaced by confused recognition. "Stop firing," Alara shouted at the top of her lungs, voice echoing. "I can disarm the meltdown sequence if you give me time." The colonel hesitated, scanning the readouts. The meltdown indicator was spiking dangerously, no doubt a fault of the chain's synergy with the vulture technology. Under pressure from above, and maybe a shred of survival instinct, he signaled a ceasefire. Alara forced a pained breath, her wheelchair's readouts blinking red. She pressed multiple keys on the side panel. Hank and Dina stumbled to her side, adrenaline surging. "What do we do?" Dina asked, eyes darting from the dragon's massive form to the soldiers above. "You said you can disarm it." "I think so," Alara breathed, grimacing. "But it'll require direct neural input. If I sever the chain, physically, the meltdown triggers. If I do it from inside the system, I might override it. But that means hooking into his mind. If something goes wrong, we both fry." Before Dina or Hank could protest, Alara closed her eyes and placed her hand firmly on a hidden panel near the chain. The V9 symbol glowed again. Meanwhile, ARX let out a low growl tail, scraping the floor. The temperature in the chamber seemed to fluctuate, as if reality itself balked at the presence of this monstrous fusion of biology and machinery. The soldiers watched from above, guns half lowered, uncertain whether to resume firing or watch how this unbelievable scenario would unfold. Alara's breathing became shallow. A swirl of faint blue energy crackled around her fingertips. From Kinzo's vantage point, it looked like the girl and the dragon were connected by arcs of sizzling light. She bit her lip, cheeks damp with sweat. Then she spoke in a voice not entirely her own. "ARX, I know you hurt. I'm here to remember. Let me guide you." The hulking dragon let out a sharp inhalation, like metal scraping on metal. A spark traveled through the chain into Alara's palm, and she winced, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Scenes flashed in her mind. Ships in orbit, the echo of battles. Engineers shouting, labs of sterile chrome surfaces, a child's voice crying in fear. She saw glimpses of old identification cards that read Project Vulture 9, a series of star charts, and a memory of a small medical bay. Through it all, she felt ARX's longing, his confusion, his rage at being abandoned. For a moment, her wheelchair's lights flickered as if shorting out. Alara gasped, forcing a mental command through the link. She recognized encryption keys, subroutines once installed to quell ARX's rebellious side. They called it emotional dampening, a cruel trick to ensure compliance. But the chain had a secondary function, meltdown if the system was threatened. She had to disable it. And to do that, she had to remind ARX who he was, who he had been built to be, and why that wasn't his fault. Above, the colonel's device beeped frantically, meltdown danger climbing. Some soldiers readied their weapons again. One of them said, "Sir, the meltdown bar is still going up." "They're failing." Alara's eyes snapped open, pupils shining with an unearthly light. "ARX, enough," she whispered. "We fight that pain together." The meltdown gauge on the colonel's device jerked, then paused mid-rising, as if forcibly contained. The chain's hum softened. Another second, and an audible click echoed through the chamber. Alara exhaled in relief. Fail-safe disarmed. A cheer erupted from Dina and Hank. Kinzo panted behind the camera, capturing the tension that had everyone on edge. The colonel signaled his team to stand down, though they kept weapons at the ready. Then the meltdown gauge on the device abruptly plummeted to 0. The colonel's brow furrowed, caught between relief and skepticism. But the situation remained precarious. ARX still wore multiple chains, and the IGC forces still considered him a threat. Freed from meltdown danger, the colonel barked, "All right, that's enough. Soldiers, move in, secure the anomaly." He shot a pointed glare at Alara. "Stand away from the chain, girl." It's time we handled this situation. Alara's exhaustion showed. Her arms trembled slightly, and she breathed in shallow bursts. She gazed up. No, you're not going to lock him up again. He's not an anomaly. He's a being you tortured and left for dead. Her words hung in the air, challenging the colonel's authority. The colonel descended the ledge in a hiss of hydraulics from his suit. Under the treaties, any living weapon is the property of the IGC, until thoroughly decommissioned. That dragon is a living weapon, unauthorized, highly dangerous. His subordinate brandished an arrest notice. You can come with us voluntarily or be detained. ARX let out a growl that rumbled the floor. The colonel's troops raised rifles. Tension snapped like a taut wire. Alara clenched her jaw, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. She tried to maneuver her wheelchair, but the left wheel ground against a chunk of debris. Hank and Dina flanked her protectively. Kenzo, still filming, whispered, "We need to go now." But the colonel's men were closing in. A commotion sounded from the far side of the chamber. Sparks showered from an overhead tunnel as a contingent of new arrivals emerged. But these were not IGC soldiers. They wore mismatched gear, each carrying an array of advanced scanning tools, net guns, and curious gadgets. At their head stood a tall, slim man named Artifacts, a notorious collector of strange artifacts and exotic beings. The man had cunning eyes and a practiced smile. Well, he announced loudly. We come seeking treasure, and we stumble upon a drama. Fortune shines on me today. The colonel grimaced. Artifacts, we have no patience for your meddling. This is a restricted matter. Artifacts grinned. Restricted? Not from my perspective. You see, I have an official salvage permit from the Trade Association. If that dragon was deemed abandoned, it might just belong to me. He winked at Alara. But if you want the salvage rights, we can talk business. The colonel bristled, barked orders to stand firm. But his subordinates looked uneasy. Meanwhile, Artifacts' group spread out, brandishing containment tools that glowed ominously, spitting arcs of net-like energy. Alara and ARX were now caught in the middle of two dangerous factions, the IGC. Enforcers who wanted to brand ARX as a threat, and Artifacts' pirates who wanted to profit from ARX as a bioweapon or trophy. The original plan, to film a sensational story, had spiraled into a standoff that threatened to tear the mining shaft apart. While these two factions exchanged heated words, Alara's gaze darted about, searching for an escape route. Dina and Hank whispered possible plans, a side tunnel, a ventilation shaft, anything. But the quake of ARX's massive body pinned them close. The dragon's breathing still sounded strained. He was free of meltdown danger, but not from the chain that bound his hind leg or the cables restricting his wings. Tension soared. The colonel threatened to arrest Artifacts for unauthorized infiltration. Artifacts boasted about his salvage permit. Soldiers aimed guns. Artifacts' men aimed net cannons. Dina hissed, Alara, we gotta move. But Alara looked at the chain that still locked ARX's leg. She realized that if left behind, ARX would be seized by one side or the other, likely parted out for research or weaponized. She refused to let that happen. Steeling herself, she shifted her wheelchair forward. Hank, Dina, I need your help. There's a small control panel at the base of that last chain. If we can override it, ARX can move. Her face was pale, voice taut with urgency. The two nodded, though fear clawed at their insides. Together, guided by Alara's instructions, they dashed across the open space toward the chain's anchor, ducking behind columns to avoid the roving beams of IGC, searchlights, and the net lasers from Artifacts' group. Meanwhile, Alara distracted the watchers by revving her wheelchair's exo-armor mode. The outer plating locked into place, forming a protective shell around her. She drew their attention, calling out, Colonel, you'd rather have the IGC. Known as the ones who open fire on a disabled child, then let me do my job here. Her words stung the colonel's pride. Stop with the theatrics, he roared back, but some of his men hesitated to shoot her. Artifacts raised an amused eyebrow, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Kenzo slunk behind an overturned mining vehicle, filming surreptitiously. He was sure that every second of footage would cause an intergalactic uproar. While the factions were preoccupied, Dina and Hank found the chain's anchor console. It was an old, rusted panel with dim green readouts. Dina fiddled with the cables. "Okay, it wants a passcode," she murmured anxiously. "We don't have that." Hank rubbed sweat off his brow. "Try the sequence from earlier. You saw those symbols on Alara's wheelchair, right? Something about V9? They improvised, punching in codes. The panel spat error messages, each beep drawing the attention of both the IGC and Artifex's pirates. Dina's hand shook. She tried sequences gleaned from Alara's earlier commands. At last, the console beeped in acceptance. The chain hissed with releasing pressure. Bolts clanked, and a thick metal bar slid back, leaving Arex's hind leg free. The dragon let out a thunderous exhale. Free to that anchor, he heaved his massive body upright. Sparks rained from the ceiling as Arex spread his wings halfway, cables dangling. A rush of air whooshed outward, nearly toppling those below. The colonel shouted, "Open fire!" as soldiers unleashed a volley of suppression blasts. Artifex's men, not to be outdone, tried launching an energy net. Chaos erupted. Beams ricocheted off the dragon's scale plating. Net lasers snapped at his wings. Clouds of dust and salt crystals swirled in thick clouds, stinging eyes and dulling the lights. Arex roared, an ear-splitting sound that rattled the very foundation. Alara cried, "Arex, go!" She pressed a final override on her wheelchair's panel. The cables that pinned his wings snapped in a shriek of metal. The towering creature flapped with violent force, stirring a gale that slammed people against walls. Then, with terrifying might, he twisted, bit through one of the remaining overhead cables, and lunged forward, carving a path out of the chamber into the outer tunnels. Dina, Hank, and Kinzo were buffeted by the blast of wind. Alara clutched the armrest of her wheelchair, fighting to stay upright. The colonel's men scattered, some firing wildly, others scrabbling for cover. Artifacts shielded his face, cursing. It was chaos. In the mayhem, Alara seized the chance. She beckoned Dina, Hank, and Kinzo to follow her in pursuit of Arex. They found the dragon partway up a collapsed ramp near a wide, jagged opening. The old miners had apparently blasted an exit route to the surface. Moonlight spilled down, illuminating the swirling salt dust in a ghostly glow. Arex perched near the entrance, panting, scales scorched from the energy. Blasts. He peered back at Alara, uncertain. She reached him, chest heaving. "We have to leave," she whispered. "You've been in chains too long." Arex huffed, wings fluttering with residual stress. Dina and Hank slid to a stop behind Alara, choking on dust. Kinzo arrived last, camera rolling. In the distance, flashlights and shouts of soldiers or pirates grew closer. Hank bent double. "Does that thing fly in space? I thought it was an organic warship." Alara coughed. "He can fold space in short bursts, but it's probably damaged. We just need to reach open air. Then we find a place to hide until we figure this out." But an explosion cut off her words. The walls shook as a heavy blast sealed the main chamber behind them. Artifex's men had used charges to block the route, perhaps to contain or corner their prey. The path to the outside remained free, though, so Alara urged Arex forward. With a low growl, he lurched up the collapsed ramp. It led to a broken portion of the mine's roof, open to the star-flecked sky. Gusts of biting wind and drifting crystals made it hard to see. Once they emerged, the land beyond was a wide plain of cracked salt flats that glowed faintly in the moonlight. On the horizon, dusty silhouettes of old salt towers rose in uneven rows. The sound of distant shuttle engines rumbled. The IGC likely had multiple ships in orbit, scanning for signs of the anomaly. If Arex tried to fly, they could shoot him down, especially if his systems were compromised. Alara bit her lip, thinking fast. She guided her wheelchair across the brittle surface, rolling behind Arex's giant steps. Dina, Hank, and Kinzo trotted, adrenaline spiking. "Now what?" Dina hissed. "They'll find us no matter what we do, right?" Alara frowned, feeling that intangible link with ARX inside her mind. The dragon slowed, glancing back at her. She sensed his confusion. "He's still reeling," she muttered. He was half awake in that chamber for a long time, under sedation or stasis. If we push him too far, he might collapse. Or lash out. Kinzo, filming breathlessly, asked, "Could we negotiate with the IGC? Show them he's not a mindless weapon?" Alara shook her head. "I tried. They only see a weapon. Or they're terrified of him. The only way is to help ARX fully regain his memory and consciousness. If he can speak for himself, maybe they'll listen. Or maybe not." She let out a strained laugh. "But at least he'll have a choice." Dark shapes cut across the sky, searchlights blinking in the distance. The group pressed on, bracing against a swirling wind that stung their faces with salt. Yarix trudged across the plain, occasionally letting out a rumbling moan, as if the open air triggered old memories of being a starship. The lines of mechanical plating along his spine glowed faintly, and the edges of his wings crackled with leftover energy. More than once, he stumbled, shaking his head as if to clear mental static. With nowhere else to go, Alara led them to a cluster of abandoned storage silos half buried in the salt. The structures soared overhead, silent tombs of the planet's heyday. Holes in their surfaces revealed empty interiors that might serve as temporary shelter from overhead scans. Hank and Dina pried open a corroded hatch, and ARX squeezed inside with careful, pained movements. He curled up, tail wrapped around a pillar, breathing heavily. Kinzo stepped in next, shining a flashlight on the battered creature. Alara followed, her wheelchair's motor humming softly. In that gloom, ARX's metallic scales reflected the flashlight beams with a haunting shimmer. Alara parked her wheelchair beside him, laying a hand on his foreleg. She could feel the warmth of his body, a melding of synthetic and organic tissue. She felt him trembling. She soothed him with quiet words, though Hank and Dina weren't sure if he could understand. Soon, Kinzo turned off the flashlight to avoid drawing attention, leaving them in partial darkness. Time slipped by in quiet tension. Outside, faint engine drones signaled that the IGC and Artifex's forces were still searching. Everyone was exhausted, caked in salt dust, hearts pounding from the chaos. Alara leaned her head back, mind swirling with half-formed memories. She saw glimpses of labs, tubes filled with nutrient fluid, monitors showing data about neural link calibrations. She recalled being very young, maybe 6 or 7, lying in a cradle of cables. That was impossible, though. She'd grown up, as far as she remembered, in a standard Earth colony orphanage after an accident left her paralyzed. But these visions suggested a different past, one tied to ARX and the dreaded Vulture program. At length, Dina broke the silence with a shaky whisper. "Alara, how did you first find him? The broadcast footage showed you sitting next to him like it was normal, but that must have taken time." Alara exhaled. "I don't remember everything. I just woke up one day in these mines alone. My wheelchair AI told me we'd crash-landed. I was searching for help and heard him screaming from below. The sound was unbearable, like it was vibrating with rage and sorrow. When I found him, his eyes locked on me. Part of me recognized him. That's when I started having these flashbacks or echoes. Something in my wheelchair responded to the devices in his chains. I spent weeks, months, trying to keep him calm, trying to communicate. Then your news broadcast crew came along." She paused, her brow furrowed. "He's not just a dragon. That form is a vessel. Once, he was a warship called ARX-V9. He was grown or built to fight. But he had too many questions, developed empathy, or something. So they dismantled him. They removed his navigational core, the emotional part. And I suspect that might be me. Or maybe a piece of me." She let those words hang in the stagnant air, a confession that unsettled everyone. Even the normally stoic Hank seemed shaken. Eventually, they drifted into a fitful rest, taking turns keeping watch for approaching threats. ARX dozed too, chest rising and falling in an uneasy slumber. Outside, the bleak planet stretched on, an ocean of salt under starry darkness. For a few hours, The group was left alone. Then an alarm shrilled from Kenzo's portable scanner. Approaching signals, he muttered. Multiple. This is it. They scrambled. Through gaps in the silo's wall, they spotted beams of searchlights sweeping the salt flats. The IGC had set up a perimeter. Hover vehicles glided, scanning for large heat signatures. Artifacts' men would no doubt be prowling too, in competition with the government forces. ARX stirred, eyes flicking open. He growled, the sound resonating in the silo. Alara placed a hand on his foreleg again. Try to calm him. We can't hide forever, she said softly to the group. If they corner him, we'll have another standoff. People will get hurt. We need another way. Dina shrugged helplessly. Like what? We can't fight them all. A sudden flicker of realization touched Alara's face. If we can get ARX to remember his original flight or warp abilities, we might outrun them. He can fold short distances through subspace. But he's too disoriented right now. She steeled herself. I'll have to do a full neural merge. I only did a partial link earlier. Hank's eyebrows shot up. That meltdown sequence nearly fried you. A full neural merge sounds like suicide. Alara swallowed. It might be, or it might awaken the starship code in him, reuniting the pilot and the vessel. She wheeled forward, looking ARX in the eyes. If we stay, they'll kill or capture him. That's not an option for me. Kenzo recorded her resolute expression, but for once, he felt guilt for filming. This was no longer about sensational headlines. It was about saving a life, too, really. If you do this, how do we help? He asked, lowering the camera slightly. Alara gave him a wan smile. Just keep them off our backs. Give me time. With ARX's massive head looming, Alara found a node near the top ridge of his plating, a small interface port, once used by engineers or navigators. She extended a cable from her wheelchair's hidden compartment, her hands shaking with anxiety. She glanced at Dina and Hank. Plug this end into that panel on his side, she directed. They complied, wincing as ARX twitched. Then Alara pressed the other end into a socket near her wheelchair's armrest. Immediately, a surge of energy sparked across the link. Her body went rigid, eyes rolled back. ARX roared, half in shock, half in confusion. The entire silo vibrated like a struck bell. Hank and Dina leapt aside as waves of intangible force rippled. Kenzo, camera forgotten, braced against the silo wall. Outside, searchlights paused, noticing the disturbance. Dust rained from the rafters. Alara's mind spiraled into a vortex of half-remembered data, combat simulations, star charts, system logs. She soared through memories that had once belonged to ARX. Battles among the rings of distant planets, the launching of warheads, the sense of being a living ship unstoppable in the void. Then she felt her own experiences, childhood in a medical ward, tubes in her spine, doctors discussing Subject V9's emotional matrix. She gasped for breath, and in that mental realm, she saw ARX as a colossal presence swirling in dark matter. Alara, a voice rumbled, not in words but in pulses of recognition. You are me. She reached out in the mental space. We were parted. We were meant to be whole. Come back. Then memory after memory flooded them, forging a new unity. The sorrow at being used as a war machine, the confusion of being dismantled, the child forced to bear an adult's burdens. Together, they fought the old control codes designed to keep ARX subservient. They cast off the meltdown triggers, the chain protocols, the sedation loops. The synergy felt explosive, yet healing, as if two halves of a single consciousness were finally aligning. In the physical world, ARX's eyes flared brilliant white, and arcs of light danced across his scales. Alara's wheelchair glowed at the control panels, her hair crackling with static. Hank and Dina shielded their eyes from the brightness. The air in the silo twisted, shimmering like a heat mirage. Then ARX moved, slowly and deliberately, rising to all fours, wings extending. Alara's body glided forward, as though pulled by an unseen force. She no longer seemed limited by the wheelchair's mobility. Something deeper had changed. A resounding boom vibrated out from them. The silo walls cracked, salt raining down. The searchlights outside converged. A metallic voice from the scanners demanded, "Stand down or be fired upon." But ARX's scaled wings crackled with subspace energy. Alera's voice merged with ARX's roar, echoing, "No more chains. No more orders." In a flash, ARX unfurled his wings fully. The silo roof shattered, sending debris skyward. The mechanical plating along his sides glowed with cosmic radiance. He crouched, then leapt into the air. Dina, Hank, and Kenzo dove for cover, half expecting to be left behind. But the swirl of energy enveloped them too, like a gravity well that pulled them upward. Soldiers outside opened fire, and Artifex's men tried launching net cannons. The beams curved around the swirling distortion, flickering uselessly. Suddenly, the entire group found themselves weightless, floating a few meters above the ground. ARX's eyes burned with newly restored power. Alera remained perched near his shoulder, an extension of his mind, or perhaps he was an extension of hers. Then, with a sound like a cosmic door slamming shut, the world bent inward. A hole in space blinked open in front of them. Wind whipped violently, swirling salt crystals in a vortex. They tumbled through. The next moment, they were gone from that spot. Where the silo had stood, a crater remained, the top half torn off by the subspace jump. Soldiers, net guns, and Artifex's furious shouting all roiled in confusion. The colonel bellowed for some scanning data. "We lost them," came the reply. Artifex cursed, kicking the salt. The planet's surface whirled with chaos, with no sign of the dragon or the girl. They reappeared in the upper atmosphere of Muoi Low Rho, clouds swirling around them like whipped foam. Hank screamed at the sudden drop, clinging to a spiny ridge on ARX's neck. Dina grabbed Kenzo's arm, and Kenzo clutched the camera reflexively, though it was spinning in midair. Alera's eyes flickered with the same otherworldly glow as ARX's. She guided them with her mind, trying to stabilize the flight. They soared above the salt storms, the starry cosmos overhead. For a moment, the group experienced the raw wonder of flight on a living warship reborn as a dragon. But ARX's body was still damaged. He faltered, letting out a guttural moan. Alera grit her teeth. "We have to make another jump, get off this planet. They'll track us with orbiting satellites." She felt the swirling confusion in ARX's subspace generators. The old injuries threatened to collapse the fold again. She squeezed her eyes shut, focusing. Another surge of energy pulsed outward. The sky ripped open in a flicker of distorted light, enveloping ARX and his passengers. Then, in a flash, they vanished once more, leaving behind only a gust that rattled the clouds. This time, they emerged in a vacuum above Muoi Low Rho, a precarious position for an organic being. But ARX's design had once been that of a starship. A faint energy shield shimmered around them, providing a bubble of oxygen and pressure. Hank and Dina clung white-knuckled, minds reeling at the impossible sight of stars all around. Kenzo's camera spun, capturing glimpses of the planet's curve below, the glistening salt plains, the small orbiting IGC. Blockade ships. One of them was dangerously close. On that orbiting vessel, alarms blared. "Unidentified warp signature," a technician shouted. "It's that dragon. They just appeared off our bow." The commander on deck stared wide-eyed at the view screen. Sure enough, an enormous silhouette with wings extended floated not far from the ship, surrounded by some sort of shimmering field. The commander barked for a firing solution, but a wave of intangible distortion radiated from ARX. The ship's engines sputtered, sensors glitched, and the crew found themselves locked out of the weapon system. The vessel drifted powerlessly. Within the bubble, Alera guided ARX away, weaving between the other blockade ships. Each one that tried to lock weapons onto them experienced catastrophic system errors. A phenomenon akin to sentient sabotage flickered in their electronics. Alara and ARX were overriding them with the leftover Vulture program's infiltration protocols. Some ships spun in place, autopilots cackling in binary. Others vented confusion on the comm channels, broadcasting jumbled cooking recipes or nonsense code. Hank couldn't help but laugh in disbelief, even while terror clung to his bones. Before the blockade could reorganize, ARX folded space again. This time a jump was longer, outside the orbit, away from immediate pursuit. They materialized near the edge of the system, surrounded by silent stars. A strange calm fell over them. No immediate signs of IGC or Artifex's forces, just a swirling cosmic backdrop. Alara gasped, hunched forward in her seat, mind reeling from the strain. ARX's breathing was ragged. Dina placed a hand on Alara's shoulder, as if to steady her. "You did it," Dina whispered. But Alara shook her head. "Not yet. We're safe for the moment, but they'll come eventually. ARX can't keep jumping. He needs repairs, both physically and mentally. We might find a hidden refuge somewhere in the system." Hank and Kenzo exchanged exhausted looks. Their entire existence had turned upside down in hours, from petty mercenaries to cosmic fugitives riding a living warship. Across the stars, faint signals blipped. The group had a fleeting sense of triumph, but none of them doubted the determined might of the IGC, or the cunning of artifacts. They would be hunted, but for now they were free. Alara let her mind relax in the neural link, feeling ARX's presence as comforting warmth. Despite his pain, he was relieved too. They were together, pilot and vessel, mind and body, no longer broken by old secrets. No one said a word for a while, content just to breathe in the surreal sight of drifting starlight. Eventually, Kenzo broke the silence with a stunned laugh. "I guess." Paralyzed human girl found chained dragon screaming for help. What happened next shocked everyone, doesn't even begin to cover it. He angled his camera to capture Alara and ARX silhouetted against the cosmos. The entire galaxy is about to lose its mind when they see this footage. Alara managed a smile, weary yet genuine. Let them. Maybe it'll make them think twice about forging weapons and then abandoning them to suffer. She glanced at ARX, gently stroking the scaled plating near her seat. "We can do more than survive. We can change how they see us." Hank nodded. "We'll have to find a place to hide first, do some repairs, gather allies maybe. The IGC will label us as criminals or contraband, or both. But we can handle it." Dina sighed, wiping sweat from her brow. "I still have goosebumps," she muttered. "That meltdown fiasco. I thought we were dead." A hush followed. The battered group realized they had formed a bond through their ordeal. Whether mercenaries or amateurs, they stood at Alara's side now, having helped save ARX from cruel captivity. Even Kenzo, whose sole aim had once been filming a sensational scoop, felt invested in ARX's fate. The dragon's heavy-lidded eyes reflected faint starlight, exuding cautious trust. For the first time in an eternity of torment, ARX was free. They drifted toward a dust-shrouded planetoid on the star charts as Zeta Minor, hoping to find cover. Alara guided ARX gently, mindful of his injuries. The bubble of atmosphere around them flickered, a sign that the living ship's systems were at their limit. They touched down on a wide plateau of rock, no more than a bleak outcropping. Kenzo hopped off, scanning for oxygen pockets. The air was thin but breathable, thanks to the residual field. ARX collapsed on the stone, chest heaving, tail curling around himself. Alara unhooked the neural link, the cable retracting. Her wheelchair's lights flickered, then stabilized. Dina and Hank carefully scouted the surroundings, finding little beyond rocky crags. It was enough for temporary shelter. They set up a makeshift camp, assembling supply crates they'd snatched from the Nostrum gaze. The sense of relief was immense, but no one forgot the threat that hung over them. IGC would not tolerate a revived Vulture warship at liberty. Artifacts would want to recapture or sell ARX. The entire galaxy might fear or covet them. Yet for this small moment, among the swirling dust of Zeta Minor, they had respite. Kinzo's camera feed quietly captured Alara stroking ARX's snout. "Are you in pain?" she asked softly, though she guessed the answer. ARX's dim eyes blinked. "Tired," came a throbbing sense of recognition in her mind, more empathic than verbal. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes at the thought of how much he'd suffered. "You rest," she whispered. "We'll figure out the rest later." She settled back in her wheelchair, though a part of her realized she no longer needed it in the same way she used to. The neural link had done something to her nerves. She could feel faint tingles in her legs. But she wasn't ready to stand, not yet. Her identity, her entire life had been shaped by the wheelchair. Some changes demanded time. Nearby, Dina, Hank, and Kinzo huddled around a small portable heater. They rummaged through the meager supplies. The mood was a fragile blend of awe and fear. They spoke in hushed tones about next steps, forging a new identity, maybe forging multiple ones. Dina considered contacting old acquaintances. Hank believed they should broadcast the footage widely, so the entire galaxy would see the truth about ARX. Kinzo had already begun drafting the final tell-all piece in his mind, though he hesitated to publish anything that might draw more hunters to them. Alara listened quietly, her gaze lingering on ARX. She could still sense his mind, a gentle hum at the back of her thoughts. The future was uncertain. They had no illusions about the challenges that lay ahead. The chase, the possible betrayal by unscrupulous factions, the moral complexities of reintroducing a warship with a human mind into galactic society. Yet amid that swirling sea of dilemmas, one unassailable fact gave her comfort. ARX was not screaming anymore. He was silent, at rest, no longer chained, no meltdown fail-safe looming. She inhaled the thin air of Zeta Minor, letting the dust-laden breeze brush across her cheeks. It carried a faint tang of minerals. Her heart pounded with the knowledge that life, as she knew, had irrevocably changed. She closed her eyes, remembering how terrified she'd once been when she first glimpsed ARX, raging and bound. She recalled the hopelessness she felt in the orphanage, her frustration at being paralyzed, the doctors who said she might never walk. Now, that it all led her here, forging a path she never could have imagined. She had stood face to face with an ancient war beast, freed him, and discovered that she was intertwined with his very existence. Memories flickered, the doctors discussing Vulture 9, the defunct project rumored to produce living ships with hearts that beat and minds that reasoned like humans. They had used spinal implants, seeded emotional cores in children to test the viability of empathy-based navigation. It was monstrous. She clenched her fists, picturing the chain that had bound ARX, the meltdown device that nearly killed them both, and the cold dismissal of officials like the Colonel. She felt a surge of determination. If she could help ARX truly heal, if she could reveal the cruelty behind these projects, maybe she could prevent future atrocities. Night fell deeper over Zeta Minor. Dina and Hank dozed in shifts, Kinzo occasionally snapping pictures of the alien sky. Alara barely slept, her mind drifting in and out of half-waking dreams. She saw stars warping, heard the echoes of wailing children in labs, glimpsed Erex's primal wrath swirling in cosmic darkness. Sometimes she saw a kinder memory, a warm voice telling her she wasn't alone, that love could flourish even in an artificially grown warship. She wondered if that was real or just wishful thinking. At some point, she felt ARX stir. She sensed confusion from him, waking disoriented, uncertain if it was safe. She soothed him mentally, promising they were hidden for now. He responded with the mental equivalent of a grateful sigh. A tear slid down her cheek. Perhaps they weren't just pilot and vessel, but siblings of fate, or two halves of the same soul. When dawn broke, if one could call it that on this lonely rock, the sky took on a darker purple hue. Hank volunteered to search for more stable shelter. Dina rummaged through supplies. Kinzo fiddled with the camera, sifting through the hours of footage he had captured. Some of it was breathtaking. The moment ARX soared above Muoy low-ROS salt plains, the meltdown chain snapping, the subspace jumps that defied all reason. Kenzo realized that if the galaxy saw these images, it would change everything. This was bigger than the sensational tattered beta stream broadcast. It might even topple governments. Yet Kenzo paused as he spotted footage of Alera's face in the midst of chaos. The raw desperation, the fierce loyalty in her eyes. He saw how she looked at ARX, how she risked her life to free him. Something about that unsettled him. This was no mere story. It was a testament to the bond they shared, a bond that only existed because some shadowy faction had violated both ARX's autonomy and Alera's childhood. Feeling an unexpected pang of respect, Kenzo decided he would consult Alera before releasing anything that might endanger them further. Eventually, Alera gathered them around. ARX was sleeping again, but his breathing was calmer. She told them her plan, to find the rumored Dark Verge, a zone of space that had once been used for illicit research. Rumor held that old Vulture labs or data caches might still be drifting there, places that could hold the key to fully restoring ARX's systems. If they could get that data, they might repair ARX's starship form properly, or at least remove the last vestiges of meltdown codes. Dina listened, uncertain. Hank scratched his chin, pointing out the danger. Kenzo thought it might be their best hope for survival. In the end, none of them had a better idea, so they prepared to move. Alera jacked back into ARX's neural link, gently nudging him awake. He rose, arching his wings, the subspace field flickering. Hank, Dina, and Kenzo donned improvised harnesses to avoid being flung off in flight. Then, as if performing a final courtesy, ARX carefully bowed his head to Alera. She reached out and touched his scales. A soft hum flowed between them, and once again they took off, leaving Zeta Minor behind. There was no telling what new challenges awaited them in the star-strewn ocean ahead. Would IGC intercept them? Would artifacts track them with bounty hunters? Perhaps, but Alera no longer felt the same fear as before. She had discovered that she and ARX were far from helpless. They carried a shared legacy of tragedy and potential, all bound up in one battered warship's heart. She silently vowed to steer that legacy towards something better. Far away, on Muoi Low Row, the colonel stood amid the ruins of the silo, glaring at the scorched ground left by ARX's last jump. Artifacts paced, cursing the missed opportunity. Soldiers scrambled to salvage data logs or trace jump signatures. But for now, Alera and ARX were beyond their grasp. Soon enough, whispers would spread that the girl and the dragon had vanished into the stars, unstoppable, a living testament to the dark secrets of the Vulture program. Paralyzed human girl found chained dragon screaming for help. What happened next shocked everyone. Indeed it had. And the galaxy was only just beginning to realize how much more shocking it could get. Those who had seen the footage or survived the chaos spoke of a defiant young woman and a monstrous metal-scaled beast. They spoke of meltdown failsafes, subspace leaps, half-lost memories. Rumors sprouted like wildflowers in every corner of interplanetary society. Some insisted she was an experiment gone rogue. Others claimed she was a hero liberating enslaved warships. In dark corridors of black market data brokers, artifacts posted a bounty for Alera's capture, or at least a method to subdue ARX. The IGC weighed whether to brand her and ARX as enemies of the state or hush up the entire incident to avoid public outrage. Even the tattered beta stream audience clamored for more updates. But Alera was far from all that noise now. She and her companions pressed onward through the cosmic expanse, forging a new path. With RX's wings folded around them and the hum of starfields in the distance, Alera felt hope blossoming in a place once dominated by fear. For the first time, the screams had stopped. ARX was with her, not just as a monstrous weapon, but as an ally, a friend, maybe something akin to a shared soul. She vowed that whatever came next, they would face it together, no longer chained, no longer alone. And that, to Alera, was worth everything.